Hey there, this is Pastor Scott, and I'm holding here something called the Life Book. And this is a book that is made by the Gideons. You might know the Gideons. They're the ones that are often putting the Bibles in hotels, and they used to at least be on college campuses and high schools, things like that, handing out Bibles. Well, the Gideons now also have this thing called the Life Book, and we're going to look at it a little bit more in depth here in just a moment. But here's what it's really for. One of the issues the Gideons are having is getting on to school campuses. And so this book is designed for students, those in middle school, high school, college, that the students can take the books and they can just hand them out to their friends and say, hey, I have something, I just want you to read it. And that's what the Life Book is all about. That's what it was designed for. Now, one of the things that I want to encourage, yes, it is designed for those middle, high school, and college students, but in reality, anyone could hand this out, and even adults definitely could get use out of the Life Book. And so this is a form of evangelism. I would call this more passive evangelism. You're not out there, you're not presenting the gospel yourself necessarily, but you're giving them a tool and saying, hey, I want you to read this and then get back with me maybe next week and we can talk more about it. It opens up that conversation. Some people, like I said, I consider this passive evangelism. Some people, when they use the term passive evangelism, they're talking about simply living a good life, setting an example for the world, and through that people will know who Jesus is. Well, they might know how a Jesus follower lives, but unless you verbally tell them about Jesus, about God, about salvation, that's not evangelism. It is great to use your life example as a tool that they may know who Jesus is and they can build trust with you. But it must include presenting the gospel, the good news. And the Life Book actually does that in a more passive way. You're not there trying to do it yourself. You're not doing those things that some of the other videos I showed how to do it. But anyway, so let's look at the Life Book a little bit. The Life Book is divided up into really 3 sections. It has it listed in the table of contents as 4. Really, it's 3 sections. And so section 1 is kind of a retelling, a summary of everything found in the Old Testament. This is important because it's not overwhelming, it's not super challenging, but it gives the background for what comes next. That's one of the things I think oftentimes as Christians we miss, is we want to focus so much on the New Testament, but if we don't know the Old Testament, if we don't know that story, we're missing out so much. And so this book actually starts out with that summary of what happens prior to the Incarnation. Jesus coming, the Son of God, the second person in the Trinity, coming down and taking on a human nature. So this is everything before that. This talks about Adam and Eve. It talks about Abraham. It talks about David. It goes through kind of the broad brushstrokes of the Old Testament. But then we get to the next part. They call it Act 2. So Act 1, they call the Old Testament. Act 2 is when we get into the New Testament. And they don't have the entire New Testament in here. They only have the Gospel of Mark. And some of the older versions of the Life Book, if for whatever reason you end up with an old version, they only had the Gospel of John. But they've transitioned to Mark, and I appreciate that. Not that I not that I have anything against the Gospel of John, but I appreciate that because Mark is the shortest of the Gospels, and it's written in a way that there's a lot of action. This, and then this, and then this, and then this. You get a sense of the immediacy of the gospel, that this is happening and this is happening. And so I think if you've never been read the Bible, if you've never been presented with the Bible, I think the Gospel of Mark is the best gospel to start with. And so I was glad to see they made that change in the life book, the Gideons did. And then you get to the third part of the book. They call it What About You? And that section's actually fairly small, but it just kind of connects the story to today. And how to become a child of God. And okay, one of the big questions Jesus asks in his ministry, he asks the disciples, who do you say I am? And so they want the reader at that point to say, okay, well, who do you say he is? Now that you've read Mark, now that you know the background of the Old Testament a little bit, who do you say he is? And that last part just gives some advice, I guess. That fourth section talks a little bit about what comes next. And it says, hey, please make sure you're reaching out to the person that handed this to you. Make sure you're in community with other believers. It talks about certain sins. It talks about how you should live certain ways. It talks about depression and worry. It talks about you are made by God and for God. I mean, it just goes on and on, just giving some basic things. Living as a follower of Christ. And so it goes like that way. Choose friends wisely. What is the heart and mind? And so that last section just says, hey, you need to become a part of the community. Here's some broad brushstrokes of what it means to be a Christian. And so if you would like, we have a bunch of these at the church, and I can get more because the Gideons produce these for free. If you would like, get some of these and hand out to your friends and say, hey, I just want you to read this. Or perhaps you own a business. Can you put a couple of these at maybe like your front desk for free for people to take if they want? And one of the things I would encourage you to do is in the very back page and the very front page, both sections, put your name, your contact information. If you want, you can put the church website, you can put other things, but your name, your contact information, your cell phone number, whatever. That way they can get a hold of you after they read it. And maybe they don't read it that first week, and maybe it sits at home for 2 years, but they never threw it away, never looked at it, and something happens in their life, and for whatever reason, they pick up this book, and they read it. And maybe 2 years down the road, you don't even talk to them anymore, and they're calling you up saying, hey, I just read this book you gave me. I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but I'd love to talk to somebody. Okay? We don't know when we plant seeds, when we give somebody a tool like this, we don't know how God is going to use that. We don't know how long it's going to take for that seed to take root. And so I'd encourage getting as many of these out as you possibly can. But it is the life book, and if you want more information about this, just reach out to me at the church, Lathrop First Christian Church, and I can get you these, or we can talk more about it. I pray this finds you well.